If you ever see a dark shadow moving about in your attic at night, do not go up there to check. Instead, call the police and tell them to bring a priest with them, because whatever it is up there could be evil incarnate, like this one man found out the hard way. This comes from a Reddit user. I was doing some work in my new house and left the drop ceiling tiles off in the living room. One night I heard a lot of commotion in the attic above. A scratching sound followed by what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor. Being a new homeowner, I wanted to inspect the attic, so I grabbed a flashlight and went up there. And that's when I saw it. Large dark shape sitting in the corner. I froze. It looked at me and let out a blood-curdling scream. I literally ran for my life, stumbling down the ladder into the living room. I didn't look back until I was safely in my car. I still don't want to go up there. The next day, my wife talked me into going back up there with her. We brought a baseball bat and some heavy tools and confronted the thing again. No sounds or movement. My wife and I decided that we were both glad that we never had to go up there again. I boarded up the access door and forgot about it. For 6 months, no sounds from the attic, which was great. But then it started again. This time, though, it seemed closer to the bedroom where our young kids sleep. My wife was adamant that we needed to figure out what was up there. So I got up on the ladder again and went into the attic. To my surprise, I found nothing. There was no hole in the roof or anywhere else. And upon inspection, I couldn't find any entry point. I did notice that the joists and rafters were all very old and dry, so I started tapping on them with the flashlight. And as I did, I could hear what sounded like tiny pebbles hitting a metal bucket. So I continued tapping on the wood until I found a hollow spot. I drilled a small hole through the wood into the attic space. What came through was a flurry of tiny rocks, dirt, and pulverized bugs. I taped a larger hole over the smaller one and started vacuuming. Out came more rocks, dirt, even more bugs, and a few feathers. After about 15 minutes of vacuuming, the noise from the attic stopped. Whatever it was, it had fled. Since then, I've put the drop ceiling tiles back up and sealed off the hole in the attic. We haven't heard a peep out of that thing since. But I still keep the light off when I walk past the living room at night. It's creepy. I love that image of you just casually walking through your living room and then suddenly thinking, oh yeah, the monster lives there. I'm going to keep the lights off just in case. But our next story shows that sometimes the monster might not be in the attic, but instead behind the wall. This comes from another Reddit user. When I was about 10 years old, we lived in a house that was built in the 1920s. The house had a peculiar layout. Long, narrow rooms with doors at either end. One of these rooms was my parents' bedroom. Our house didn't have any closets, so my mom would store clothes in a large wardrobe in that bedroom. One evening, I was playing in my room, which was right next to my parents' room. Suddenly, I heard a knock coming from inside the wardrobe. Now, I knew that my parents kept their clothes in there, but my mom was an avid sewer, and she would also store spools of thread and buttons in there too. I thought maybe a spool of thread had come loose and gotten stuck under something. Being the adventurous child that I was, I decided to investigate. I opened the wardrobe door and peered inside. I didn't see anything. Then I thought I heard a faint knock again, but it didn't seem to be coming from inside the wardrobe. Then it hit me. The knock was actually coming from inside the wall. Raced to my parents' room and pounded on the wall next to the wardrobe. My dad was inside watching TV, and he immediately turned it off and came to investigate. He listened to the wall and then said, "Don't worry, honey, it's just the wind." And he must have thought that he convinced me because he picked me up and carried me back to my room, but I wasn't convinced. The wind didn't blow that way. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I got out of bed and crept back to my parents' room. I stood on a chair and pressed my ear to the wall next to the wardrobe. I heard it. A distinct knock, 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 followed by a dragging sound. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I don't remember what happened after that, but I assume that my parents came running and that they probably told me to stop being silly and get back in bed. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. Years later, I moved out of my parents' house and into my own apartment. While unpacking, I came across a photo of my family taken in the early 80s. In it was my dad, my mom, and my brother, and I was nowhere to be seen. I asked my parents about it, and they told me that I was on in the picture because I was being a handful. They took the picture earlier that day, and I refused to smile for the camera. As a punishment, they put me in the spare bedroom while they went out for dinner. and took turns checking up on me every half hour or so to make sure that I did and cause any trouble. But I think they might have been hiding something else too. That room, by the way, was the spare bedroom next to their bedroom, the one with the wardrobe, the one with the secret knocking monster. That's terrifying. I love the idea that you could be exploring your new home and just happen to stumble upon an interdimensional portal in the wall. But luckily for you, there are ways to tell if your house has a demon in the walls before you move in. Here are a few tips from an actual demonologist. Look for things like pentagrams drawn upside down, backwards, or in unusual places like mirrors or windows. You don't want to be hanging upside down trying to clean those. Also, watch out for strange symbols that appear overnight. Some people say that if you draw a pentagram on the floor with chalk and then erase it, demons will try to reconsecrate the area and may leave symbols behind in an attempt to do so. Also, when buying a house, ask the real estate agent if anyone died in the home. It's common knowledge among real estate agents that if a death occurs in a home, it will often decrease its value. So sometimes they try to hide that fact from sellers. And finally, do your research. If you're planning on renovating your new home, find out if the previous owners did any major renovations recently, especially to bathrooms and bedrooms. See, in many homes, the bathrooms and bedrooms are lined with plaster, and if the previous owners removed that plaster to renovate the room, they may have inadvertently unleashed something evil that was trapped in the walls. Because believe it or not, there is such thing as a haunted house. And if you want to know how to protect yourself against demonic possessions, click the video on screen now.